it's very challenging to live with whatever we carry.
Centerstone is a one-of-a-kind place.
And it was the best decision I ever made in my life. There's nothing holding me back anymore.
To talk with Centerstone, who is a national leader in mental health and substance use disorder treatment, where we highlight their Recover With Us campaign. Karsen has been on the show before, and she joins us again. Good morning. Happy Wednesday to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, we're rolling with it today. A lot of rain down in this neck of the woods, Karsen.
Yeah, and it's so humid. It's so terrible.
It's not fun out there today.
No.
But you know what? It's never a terrible experience when you're working on yourself through Centerstone and their wonderful agencies and avenues in which we can benefit and recover. How's everything been since the last time we talked, Karsen?
Good. We are growing. We've been a lot busier, steady, and we've been able to help several folks connect to different services that they need. It's been going really well. We've had folks come in and, transition from here to a 30-day rehabilitation program for substance use. And we've had a few folks come in and then transfer out to group homes or settings that are going to be really supportive of them. So it's been going well.
Wonderful. And while our audience is just joining us in here live, could you fill us in on the Crisis Stabilization Unit for folks that may have missed that information?
Sure. So the Crisis Stabilization Unit, or the CSU, is a facility in Carterville. We're way down in southern Illinois. We have 8 beds. We only serve adults. We are not a hospital, so we're totally voluntary. We are for folks who are having a hard time or just needing some more support, or for folks who are in crisis and aren't able to, go to a hospital if they need to, or don't have a ton of support at home and need some more intensive things. So we are here to just kind of help people through whatever they're going through at the moment. We can offer, medication adjustments, things like that. We do a lot of groups, focus on coping skills, safety planning, and just getting people back to where they need to be so that they can go home and go on about their lives.
Well, and this is such an important topic because we always we talk about a lot of different entities that revolve around mental health, and we talk substance use disorder, but we don't really talk about that real mental crisis, that that real very serious event that happens to so many people, to where for them the world completely ends for a little bit, and there's so many hurdles and so many thoughts and feelings. And take me through how important it is, especially when someone's in crisis. How important is it to have a core team around you so when you're navigating that maze?
It's everything. It just is. I think, for you or I'm not sure what your personal support system looks like, CJ, but, for me, I would have folks around me who could help me get what I needed and really validate what I was feeling, who I could talk to and ask for help. And not everybody has that. And so here at the CSU, we do have recovery specialists who are trauma-informed and trained, but who also have some degree of lived experience, whether that be mental health stuff themselves or substance use histories, who are in recovery, who can really connect to the people that we serve on a level that a lot of paid professionals can't. And can be like, look, man, I've been there. I can, this is what worked for me. It might not work for you, but let's figure this out. And so just having people around who understand and who aren't, judgmental is key, because crisis looks different for everybody. So it could be a full-blown 100% mental health, or it could be life stuff. It could be recent homelessness, a breakup even. There are, different things for everybody that could really just send somebody kind of spinning.
Well, and that's a really good point, because so many times we always just, we might just touch on, maybe our neighbor, our cousin, our best friend has a mental health crisis and a complete crisis standpoint. And we just kind of assume as people sometimes, as a society, we just assume that it's drug related. We assume that it's something to do with maybe a schizophrenia. We assume these things. But, you just hit on something so elegantly that these things can happen on the spur of any situation. There's not a one size fits all for crisis. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Sure. And I think it really does look different. What I would consider a crisis would be very different than someone else. For me, it would be the sudden loss of income or even a sudden loss of childcare
Hmm.
would completely set me back. Things like that. And there are so many people who, especially those who have Medicaid, which is our primary client base, who don't have as good of access to healthcare, medical, or mental health, and who can't get their medications refilled. And that could be enough too. If you can't afford to refill your meds,
Yeah.
then what are we doing? And so I think that it could be very mental health based like that, or anything life related truly could get anybody at any time.
Well, you hit on something there too with, even a breakup. And I wanted to ask you, as you guys are working with the individual that's in crisis, how important is it for them not to compare crises to what others are going through? Because, I'm sure if they're sitting there and they know that maybe just going off of your example, it was a breakup and they've gone down this rabbit hole. They're in a very tough spot. Well, all of a sudden they hear, well, actually, I just lost my house. I lost everything in this fire. I don't know what to do. I've lost it. I've lost everything. Then their crisis doesn't seem as important, which is that the best thing to do to get over that crisis is to downplay the effect it has and really how grand it is on the scale?
No, it does depend on the
Okay.
person for
Yeah.
that. But I think that, our my recovery specialists are so great at finding that balance between listening and letting people vent and then focusing on moving forward. So there are folks who are really comfortable sharing what has happened with the rest of the clients here, but for the most part, in a group setting, we are talking about how we are feeling, not necessarily what happened, but what happened after that, how it's affected us, and how we're going to change that moving forward, regardless of the circumstances. Now, there are certain things that are very traumatic that people really do need to talk about,
Yeah.
but we do focus heavily on moving forward, and that kind of helps equalize the crisis because there are folks who come in and think that they are at the lowest point they'll ever be and are really having a hard time and leave and they're like, things are kind of okay. And I think that there
Yeah.
is something to be said for that too.
Well, and honestly, just that mindset alone, of how are we feeling now, currently, in this present state, not with a situation that happened a week or a month or a year ago. That mindset's got to be healthy and really, honestly, a big staple in why CSU is so successful because that's a tool that you could use for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and we do. We try to focus a lot on kind of reframing the way we think about things, which is hard and kind of eye rolly for a lot of people, myself included. If I'm being thrown into something that I hate, I'm going to talk about hating it
Yeah.
instead of talking about it as like an opportunity for growth, because not everybody can do that so quickly. But we try to help folks reframe and just kind of stay in the moment because we can only control what we can control. And ultimately, that's our own actions and care for ourselves moving forward.
Something that you were talking about, and you're 100% right, is how your recovery specialists and the individuals, a part of the team, work with the individual that's there. And take me through how delicate of a process that could be, because we're talking about how great it is, and you're right. I mean, your staff and the staff at Centerstone does excellent work, but I think it's important to know how detailed and intricate their work is because not everyone can do what your guys are doing over at Centerstone.
It's tough. It's a very fine line that they walk because we
Yeah.
do want to support, but we also want to push a little to get out of our comfort zones and to try new skills. And that is a very, very delicate balance. My guys over here do really well. And I think that one of the benefits of the CSU having so few clients at a time is that it really gives my recovery specialists the flexibility and the freedom to cater their material more towards who's here at the time. Um, we do have a set list of group topics, but within that header, there are so many things we could do. And there's so many things we do with the clients that are here. So, at this moment, we have some folks here who really need to work on communication, kind of boundaries things. And so we're working that in more than we would usually with them. And so my recovery specialists are able to just sort of tailor their responses to who's here, both individually and in a group. And something else with them is they all have their own lane, if you will. Everybody's got sort of a specialty or something they're really, really good at. So I've got a recovery specialist who does a lot of art related, like therapy groups with clients. I've got one that focuses on like a more evidence-based practice a lot. We have one who really specializes in that communication and assertiveness. And I think that, they each build their own bonds with our clients and they each have something unique to bring to the table too.
I wanted to touch on just a tiny bit of what you were hitting on at the end about arts. And I've heard it, and obviously I'm not an expert, Karsen. It's just, something I've thought about is whenever an individual is able to get to that point of comfortability, to where, obviously not when they're in crisis, but whenever things start to slow down a little bit, is having an activity such as art, such as, puzzles, such as you name any other activity in the world. Is that an important step to maybe finding that mental health balance that so many are looking for?
Yeah, it is. It can serve several purposes. So those activities, those, hobbies, things like that, and arts especially, can be great coping skills. And they can also be a tool to help people, focus on what they're doing with their hands and get out of their own heads and really open up. I don't know if you've ever, it's kind of like the phenomenon of like the car conversation. If you're not looking at each other and you're driving, you're going to be talking about a lot more openly than you would just face to face. And so it's kind of that same sort of buffer, especially here. So my guys will, especially the first couple of days someone is here, make an effort to play a game of cards or sit down and color or do something like that where the hands are busy and the mind is free to feel a little bit less restrained in what they're willing to share. But we do focus a lot on that, like skill development too, because hobbies are important. Things like that really are important to the upkeep of mental health.
Yeah. Well, and another thing I wanted to ask you about, which I think's, just a very important component, is that first 48 hours at CSU. I could only imagine that so many have anxiety issues. And we all know what time can do to somebody that has a major anxiety disorder. How crucial are those first couple of days, that first 48 hours, and how do you guys work with the client that's there maybe having some issues adjusting to a new schedule, a new routine? What does that look like?
We try to stay pretty structured, but the first day especially, we're pretty flexible.
Okay.
So they come in, they meet with our nurse, and then they'll meet with myself or someone else who does the assessments at intake. And it's a lot of information really fast. It's a lot of questions. It's basically somebody telling a life story, to someone they've just met. And it's really hard and it takes a toll. So we give lots of breaks that first day. We're very, very clear about our expectations, our rules. If you need a break, have it. We have kind of all day to get this done, right? So if it needs to be in 20-minute pieces every half an hour, we can do that.
Very important.
And so we just try to give time for them to settle, time for them to kind of be around on the fringes of the unit and kind of see the groups and introduce to everyone and just settle in, have some time for sure.
Well, and Karsen, another thing I wanted to hit on as well, because so many people were very interested in the Crisis Stabilization Unit, especially once the article came out. But, some of the questions they had, just some of the FAQs, if it's okay to ask you again while
Sure.
we have the time, is this is in all, what's the age level start at? Is it 18 or 21?
It's 18.
Okay. And now this runs until, you could be 60 or 70 even and still utilize this, correct?
Sure.
And how long is the process to get somebody inside of the CSU? Because, this is something that I've always kind of, and you and I actually, I think, maybe talked about this a little bit. Apologies, this sinuses with this rain is kicking me.
I know.
Is the fact that, whenever you're in that crisis and you need help and you're looking for it, when you're Googling or you're doing whatever to find resources, how quickly of a turnaround, if space is available, could you start seeing that individual that inside CSU?
A lot of times, about half the time, it's same day.
Wow.
So if we get a call and we have enough staff here to get somebody in, we will do it as soon as we can. At maximum, it's usually 48 hours, maybe 72 if we're really slammed. Like everyone in this field, we are kind of short-staffed right now.
Yeah.
And so we do have to sometimes make a decision between having enough staff to do, the groups and care for the folks that are here, or having the staff to do an admission. And usually the folks that are here kind of went out. So we will definitely make it happen within 48 hours, 98% of the time.
To me, though, I mean, even when you said if there's space available as soon as we can, that's huge for somebody that, is going through the battle of a lifetime. And it's information where folks at home watching us, put that down in a book somewhere, because you all know of somebody, we all do, that is going through some type of journey. And if we could have that information, if they really need it, and say, hey, call CSU, we could really help them probably a long way. Now, Karsen, on top of that, a question for you that I kind of have just for me personally is, how do I identify my own crisis? Because, if you're by yourself, you don't have that support system around you. How do you know truly what a crisis is? What's it look like? And, what's your advice to somebody that knows, man, something's wrong, something's not going right? What are some ways that we can identify that without maybe having that support system observing it for us?
That's a great question.
I don't ask very many of those.
It can be really tough because it's human nature to do, I'm fine. This is fine. It's hard, but it's fine. And it's really hard. So I would look out for major changes in routines. If you're not able to make yourself get up and take a shower, and it's fine, but then tomorrow you do the same thing, and then tomorrow you do the same thing, or you're not sleeping well, you're not eating, at least at a baseline, at least a couple of things a day. Ignoring phone calls, can't make yourself take care of the things you need to do. And that happens to all of us. Sorry, I'm also having some sinus
I get
issues.
it. No, it is a rough one out here in Illinois today.
It's terrible. There are definitely periods for all of us where we kind of fall off a little bit and just need some time to get it back together. But if that's extended, if it's more often than usual, something about us as people is we know what things look like when it's going well. So, we know that this is what I'm usually capable of doing.
Yep.
And I think that comparing yourself to that, not in like a negative judgmental way, but just like, this is not it, is a good way to kind of do that. And I would say to you, try so hard to not be afraid of reaching out for help. It's a big step to take yourself to an ER or to call 911 if you're just having some thoughts. It's hard for some people to do that. We do have a unit number that's always on. You can call us directly at any point if you can't quite take the step, to get to an ER and say, hey, I'm really not feeling well. Our mobile crisis team too is able to go out to people's homes. So if they call the CSU directly or call our crisis line, we can get mobile crisis out to you. So you don't have to go to the ER necessarily. But it's hard to take that step. So my advice is to try so hard to power through and just do it, because you know what you need. Deep down, you do.
And this may sound like a silly follow-up question, but it's just one that kind of keeps coming to my mind just because of how my brain works. I'm someone that gets a bump on their arm and WebMDs it, and I've had brain tumors for 48 years, And whenever my question is a secondary follow-up, for the ones that maybe know that their habits, their routines change, maybe they haven't, picked up their house in a couple of weeks. Maybe, I haven't taken a shower in 3 or 4 days. Is there, because I'm not an expert, folks at home, I'm just the terminology. Is there a way to differentiate maybe just being a little bit lazier that week too, or maybe for that extended period of time, and not blowing it up in our own heads? Because if you sit there going, man, something's wrong, I'm not doing this, or this. Well, it could just be because we didn't do it that week, I don't know. It's just something I thought about.
No, I hear you, and I am a person who needs to be held accountable for a lot of things. And it's completely, yeah. So I think that, we don't want to kind of catastrophize things on our own too, but for an extended period, because too, you will also know if this happens every once in a while, if things have to get really messy, you should see this office, CJ. I'm going to clean it up probably this week. but I know that about myself. Like that's a pattern of mine where
Right.
things have to get a little bit wild and then I kind of go back through and collect. And I do that repetitively my entire life. And so I think that, you know, the routines, but then also those patterns, you know, because sometimes it's such a trap though, because sometimes being a little bit lazy, letting something fall off can be self-care too. You know, if you've had a crazy week at work and you're not going to clean the house, do not. You should sit,
Yeah.
you should relax, you should have that time, right? So I think just trying to figure out the other factors at play in something like that for sure is going to be what matters, because me too. I know.
Yeah, it just to me, it's just one of those things that's always been so fascinating to me is how powerful some our minds are and how we can go down the rabbit hole if we allow ourselves to.
Mhm.
And whenever we're getting back and just talking CSU as a whole, whenever you're experiencing the individuals from day one until the end, and it's voluntary, there's not 2 weeks, is it? It's just whenever the individual is prepared to move on, correct?
Yes, so we do usually max out at a 10-day stay,
Okay.
unless we have something set up that's going to take a little bit longer. We can be a little flexible every once in a while, but we do not have to stay until 10 days. They just go home when they feel like they're ready. Yeah.
Well, and my question is, I could only imagine, you're sitting there and you're working with an individual, John Smith the third, whatever, and he's day one, he comes in obviously defeated. Day
Mhm.
two, still a little bit defeated. Day three, day four, you see some progress. Whenever you're at the end of the journey with them inside CSU, how much do they discover about themselves that they never knew? Not really just about who they are personality wise, but just their interests and what makes them happy.
They do. They do a lot. And it is truly the best part of doing this work is watching folks open up and come out of their shell, especially those who have been, this is their first go around in any kind of mental health treatment, because that's so hard. The
Yeah.
first one is always the hardest. And so people who come in and are just, so down on themselves, like, oh, I can't believe I'm even here. Like, this is just, and then they keep showing up and they put in the work and they start connecting with other folks who have maybe been around the block a few times, or maybe not, you never know who's here. And they start to make those connections and they start to connect the groups together and they start sort of building this bigger picture. And then what it is for me is then when the next new person comes in and that person's been here a few days
Yeah.
and they're able to kind of in a group create a more supportive environment for someone who's new or provide some of this like newfound insight to a new person. And that's where it's at for me, is the folks who come in and just grow and grow and grow and then pass it along to the next person. I really like that.
Well, and to me though, another part about that group environment, I got to ask you is what's it like when somebody that comes in and after a couple of days is able to help the next latest arrival? You know what I'm saying? Is there an empowerment process to this too, where hey, we're actually helping each other?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there have been, standing friendships that have been made here. There have been several folks who have like traded numbers
Yep.
and hugged and cried when someone's gone home. And it's really powerful because you really don't know. I mean, and these are folks from completely different walks of life and completely different circumstances that have just experienced similar things.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes is to make a really strong connection with someone. So it is very cool. And we do have clients who will, speak up a little bit more than they need to in groups. And be like, yeah, we were talking about this yesterday and I was really thinking, and just kind of like take over and
Yeah.
try to provide that insight, and it's awesome.
That's definitely got to be one of the more invaluable pieces of
Yeah.
what you guys do. And Carson, before I let you go, are there any developments to CSU that I didn't hit on? And folks at home, this is completely on the fly because we just kind of got on the Zoom and chatted because I didn't send you questions this time.
No, that's okay. No, yeah, we are nothing major. We do
Okay.
have, so right now Centerstone's outpatient is a little limited, and so we are just having longer wait times with that. We are working on doing a more intensive follow-up, 30 days after somebody leaves, especially if they're waiting to be connected to an outpatient therapist.
Yeah.
So in that situation, we're checking in, you know, if they feel like they need that, and doing a little bit more structured like sessions. So we're almost doing telehealth with them once they leave, just to try to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Because if you're at a point where you need something like the CSU and then you leave and there's no follow-up for whatever amount of time,
Yes. Okay.
that is not helpful. So yeah.
Really cool. Well, Karsen, I always enjoy chatting with you. I'm glad that you joined me on the show again this Wednesday, and I hope all goes well and you have a great rest of your Wednesday, and hopefully your sinuses do better than mine are today. We're going to fight it, Karsen.
We're going to figure this out together, CJ. Don't worry.
Hey, folks.
Thank you so much.
No problem, Karsen. Seriously, thank you. Folks at home, are you looking for a fresh start on the road to recovery? Life free from addiction is possible, and it starts with Karsen and the great folks over at Centerstone. Centerstone's that national leader in mental health and substance abuse disorder treatment for people of all ages. With that commitment to delivering care that truly changes people's lives, their dedicated clinicians use evidence-based practices in those treatment programs, meaning the recovery care plan is developed for you based on the latest science. There's so many unknowns on the road to recovery, but one thing you can know for sure is that Karsen and Centerstone will be there for you every step of the way, be that constant guiding force as you're on this journey. Addiction can happen to anybody. It's 2024. We all know the stigma. It's getting destigmatized, but here's the good thing. I don't know if you know this, folks. Recovery can happen to anybody. So if you could, start working towards your recovery now, today, at recoverwithus.org. That's recoverwithus.org, or give Karsen a call at 1-877-HOPE-123. Karsen, good to see you. Take a quick break, come back. Daily Show on a Wednesday next.